Hello, I'm Kaveh Madani, a Henry Hart Rice Senior Fellow at the Yale MacMillan Center for International and Area Studies, hosting another session of discussions on their lockdown on the different aspects of COVID-19. This time we'll be talking about the environmental dimensions of the ongoing crisis as one of the episodes of the Iran Contemporary Forum. Now I want to ask our guests to introduce themselves.
Hi, Kaveh and other audience. My name is Ali Nazemi. I'm assistant professor at Concordia University, Montreal, Department of Building, Civil and Environmental Engineering.
Hello, my name is Hamid Pouran. I am faculty member at the University of Wolverhampton, UK.
Welcome. It's great to have you both. Let's start with Ali. Ali, what's up with the environment? How is COVID-19 related to environment? We hear all the academics now are pulling COVID-19 toward their domain. Can you tell us more about the relationship between the environment and the coronavirus?
Well, I mean, corona at the end of the day is a virus, and virus is coming from the environment, obviously. So it is a creation of the environment, and the feedback is actually going on the environment. This is more on a philosophical level, but if you want to look at it from actually what's happening on the ground, COVID-19 has caused severe changes in our lifestyle, at least in the past couple of months globally, and that resulted into basically a slowdown and maybe lockdown of some of our important socio-economic activities that affect the environment. And therefore now, by locking down those activities, now we are seeing some changes in the environment as well. So they are indeed, they are related to one another.
So from what I'm hearing, we should be celebrating things. Hamid, is it all positive, or shall we be worried about what is happening around us?
Not quite, because I think it has two aspects. On one side, it shows how vulnerable we are with respect to the nature, because this virus is part of the nature. And on the other hand, it shows our tangible impact on the environment, because during the past 3 months, we have seen that air is cleaner, water is cleaner. So obviously, we could see, all of us, that our industrial activity or daily activity has tangible impact on life, on ecosystem. But on the negative side, well, many people are working from home. Many people are struggling for their income. They love to go back to work. So the real question to me that we are facing is, how can we have sustainable environment? How can we sustain this clean air, this clean water when the COVID-19 is over?
So, let's elaborate a little bit more on this. I'm an environmental expert, of course. I want to know more and discuss the different aspects. So Ali, we are now hearing positives and negatives. Can you review some of these positive and negative impacts?
So positive and negative are indeed relative concept. I mean, if we really want to look at it, what is positive and what is negative, then we need to define what we mean by positive and negative, and that's actually then be required to say that, okay, positive and negative in what scale, what time scale, and what spatial scale. So, it's really dependent. I mean, Hamid mentioned about the water quality and water quantity aspect. I mean, obviously, if we want to look at the industrial use of water, obviously we are seeing that less withdrawal are happening because activities are locked down. So therefore, the quantity of the water staying in the environment are increasing. The quality of the return water, which is going from our factories and stuff into the water bodies, is indeed improving. However, if you now bring these processes into a city environment, we are seeing that the water use in cities are increasing, obviously for obvious matter of hygiene. Water qualities are decreasing. Now we are seeing reports of chemicals, increased chemical in the sewerage of urban water bodies. So again, this is really depending from what aspect, from what angle you want to look at the process. Again, the same process can have a different short-term and long-term impacts. For instance, in a short term now, what we're seeing in Iran is that lots of, I would like to call it unkindness toward the domestic animals in particular. You know, you even posted in your channel in Instagram and other places and Twitter that basically now, unfortunately, some people are leaving their pets and domestic animals that they were living together. Now they are releasing them. So this is obviously, if you want to look at it from this is not a positive impact. This is indeed negative. However,
just for clarification, so you know, there were rumors that COVID-19 might be transferred through animals and cats and dogs in particular. So we saw some reaction, emotional reaction.
Actually, you actually come to a very good point, and I would like to come back to that just after putting this. But in the long term, again, now this might actually, this issue of COVID-19 will result to some sort of recognition of the wildlife and preserving their territories and stuff. So again, we don't know what's going on. And going back to your point, which is, I guess, is very relevant, is that what we are seeing now is at least at the time being, what we are seeing is a set of reactions toward an incident, a global incident that happened. These reactions can be positive, can be negative, but we cannot draw any conclusion of that. That is what I want to mention at this moment.
So we have a lot of things happening at the same time, and what I'm hearing from you is that it's too early to judge if overall, the net effect is positive or negative. But even that requires a definition from whose standpoint, right? If it's from the Earth's standpoint or from human standpoint, and that also I think brings up another interesting question. The Earth is doing fine without us, right? And a lot of environmentalists who have a lot of people in the environmental business who have been saying that humans are not superior to other elements of the nature are trying very hard to stay alive. When it comes to making choices, people are even willing to leave their pets outside. So I wonder if those slogans are true, if you really believe we are not superior. If otherwise, this is all good for the nature. We shouldn't try to build to develop medicine. We shouldn't try to develop vaccines and just let the nature balance itself. But what we are seeing is against that. So when we say positive or negative, I think in most of the cases we mean what is good for us in the long run, and if our civilizations would survive, if we can survive or not. But Hamid, can we talk about some specific positive and negative impacts in Iran? We are hearing that, for example, traffic had reduced at least before the new year. Less activities, as Ali mentioned. Other things you can think of?
I think Iran, like many other places, like Italy or Spain, perhaps is affected very badly with respect to COVID-19. It affects everybody's life, but people need to have income. So on one hand, people are struggling to maintain their income and have their life as routine. But on the other hand, when they are forced to stay at home, well, we see cleaner air everywhere. We see that nature is thriving. We see some sort of wildlife appearing in cities and urban environment. Yes, that's the positive side from short-term point of view. But perhaps if we have a long-term perspective, hopefully when it's over, people want to compensate what's been happening in the past. And they do twice as before. They say, okay, the environment has had a break. Let's double our effort to compensate our financial loss. So the environment, to answer your question, yes, the environment is in better shape in Iran, but because Iran has its own unique challenges, it is not in a position to financially encourage people to stay at home and avoid going to work. It's not in a position to provide the same kind of stimulus and opportunities that a country like UK or developed country could provide for its people. It has given people the opportunity to choose or act carefully based on their own decision And of course, when you are struggling for your income monthly, and you may consider, as some people have said, either I have to suffer hunger or I have to suffer from COVID-19. So I prefer to go to work. So to summarize, from financial point of view, it has damaged the country. But from environment point of view, in short term at least, it has had some benefits for the environment.
So you brought up a good point. So now you're talking about a trade-off between the environment and economy, and there is a belief that economic improvement is equal to environmental degradation. Now I want to ask you, Ali, how much do you believe in this? Because we are seeing that around the world, if you go around the world, we're seeing the countries which are doing better for their environment also have better economy. So shall we first improve our economy and then do something for the environment? Can we even think about it? As Hamid just said, if I'm suffering, if I'm starving, can I think about the environment? Can I think about the end of the century? We are seeing a situation in the United States, at the moment that people are fighting for toilet paper. Do they care about emissions? Do they care about the environmental damages? Do they care about what scenarios, under which scenarios we were doing what at the end of the century or not? So which one should we fix? What should we do? Shall we care about the economy or the people, or at the same, both of them at the same time? And this was all, it's not a discussion only in the environmental field. Right now we are seeing the debate, like which one do you have to care more about, health or economy? Or can you even do that? Should you weigh them separately? Shall you put them in the same basket and try to balance them? So these I think COVID-19 is challenging some of these beliefs. Ali.
Kaveh, you mentioned a great point, I guess. Incidents like COVID-19 during the history, it's shaking human way of thinking and perhaps a lot of systems. The renaissance that we see, for instance, in Europe is some people arguing that this is basically because of the Black Death in Europe, and questions that some intellectuals are starting to ask, and that shake the whole culture of European culture back in the time. But now going back to the concept that you truly raised, during the current Anthropocene, there is no doubt that the economy is driving force of the human, and human is the driving force of the environment. There is no question about that. So therefore, attention to the economy is, the way that actually we treat our economy is the way actually we are dealing with the environment. And the examples are different. If you want to look at the early developments after the World War II, particularly in some part of the world like Soviet Union, that was exactly what you mean. Economical growth, development was equal to environmental degradation. A good example of that is RRC. But now let's go actually more in time. So let's look at the 90s and after, or 21st century. We are seeing that the countries who are actually much more environmentally aware are the countries that actually who are having higher GDPs. And this is actually quite making sense. People who are not starving are able to think about sentimental things. And one of the sentimental things that we are thinking is environment. So within the context of the way that we are running our system, most precisely our economical system, indeed, if we want to make any better in the environment, we need to basically look at the better situation of the economy, or at least better distribution of the wealth. Because if the wealth is distributed well, then at least all the people are going to have a common sense on how we can deal with these things, and you are not going to have severe departure between the way people think about common stuff.
And I'm glad you mentioned distribution of wealth, because GDP on its own, I don't think would be an indicator. It's one of the factors, one of the variables, but compare the United States, China, like some of the rich countries with some of the other countries which might have a lower GDP but are doing better for the environment. So the way countries run their system, of course, cultural factors matter, but people should be able to satisfy some of their basic needs before they think about the long term and what happens to the next generations and so on. I think this is something very important. This is something I'm teaching these days at Yale, that when it comes to the Middle East, the easy solution is, these countries should reduce their oil production and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, develop solar panels, and address their water problems and import food, and everything would be golden. But the reality is that you're dealing with economies which are not necessarily diversified enough, which have not got decoupled from water. They still provide jobs through water and land. So you have all these problems together. It becomes very hard to adopt a separate, so in an alternative, to change the course, to change the path. Yes, we know Sweden is doing good. Yes, we know some of the European countries are doing good when it comes to the environmental matters. But can we move from point A to B? The question is the transition path. How do we change the world? Why have we not been able to do the same in the United States? Does the United States see what is happening in Scandinavia or some European countries or not? Even you go from US to Canada, the situation can be different when it comes to the environment. So these are some of the questions. And then, Hamid, you mentioned the issue of starving and basic, needs. One thing is the citizens and the society, the people. The other thing is the government, right? So the government right now must be stepping in and do things. And you think the economy is weak and they can't do it. So what are the responsibilities of the governments? What can the citizens do at this point?
Well, if you allow me, I'd like to add a quick point to what Ali just said. I think, and then I answer your question. I think the whole concept of environmental impact assessment is the reason that helps us to do things in a way that supports the environment and supports our economic progress. The reason that we are doing environmental impact assessment is to be able to grow our economy while we respect nature's boundary and its integrity. That's one thing. But answering your question, citizens, with respect to environment, at least they could see their impact on the environment. They are in a position that, at least at some part of the planet, including Iran, people have been staying at home for some time, or at least majority of people, they've been away and see that everything is in better shape, mundane things, in the past 2 months, for example. They have the opportunity, or they have the problem to make it better or worse. I think feeling more responsible, seeing the impacts, personal awareness with respect to environment is something that we could learn from the environment. We could show people, look, this is what you do. This is impact of your behavior. For example, look, the amount of nitrogen dioxide, the amount of pollution or smog in big cities. When you are staying at home, when you use public transport, when it's safe, we have less of this. So I think it could help, let's call it forced awareness. We have had kind of forced awareness in citizen level that people can see the impacts of their behavior on environment. So,
but this, along with this forced awareness, there were moments that we realized how close we are to, death.
Yeah.
So if I'm so vulnerable, if I die, 2 years from now, there might be another thing, another pandemic, and I might die. And forever, all the environmental scientists have been talking about the end of the century, global warming, all these things. If you look at the reports from the World Economic Forum, when people were ranking the different risks, what might be the biggest risk to the human societies, we didn't talk about what we are seeing today. So what if tomorrow I come to you and say, look, you saw what was happening, and your response would be, yeah, if I'm so close to death, why do I care about the future? The nature would balance itself. Who cares? And then the other thing is, can I encourage cooperation later on? When people saw moments in just recent history, forced awareness about how ugly politics can be, that the countries can get into competition, can steal masks from each other when it comes to sharing equipment and saving each other. They do nothing and start the blame game. Same governments must be solving and addressing problems of the world, global warming and so on. Can I really encourage people and ask them for more cooperation when they have seen, that yes, the nature gets better, but at the same time, individualism might be promoted and nationalism might be promoted. Canada and US might get into problems with each other over COVID-19. So would would people become more cooperative or less cooperative? Ali, what do you think?
I mean, these are all legit questions, and to be honest with you, I don't think that we can say anything. I mean, we can two things. We can do two things. One is actually make our genuine wish about what we would like to see in the future in an ideal situation. And indeed, on that word of future, I would like to see more awareness. I would like to see a more just economy. I would like to see a better distribution of the wealth, and also more environmental stewardship, not only by the governments, but also by citizens and NGOs and everybody who's sharing the world together. So that is one side of the story. But the other side is that we need to see what is actually going on in terms of the realities that we have on the ground. In such an economical system and in such a competitive world that we have, and people are basically, as you noted, for doing their political competition and economical competition, they are doing sometimes nasty things. Unfortunately, I would see, at least in the short-term future, we're going to see some rise of individualism and perhaps some sort of adverse impact that in fact is not going to provide an awareness, in fact going to provide some sort of individualism. But in a longer run, if you want to look at it from a 2 years, 5 years perspective, I guess that would be the time that the power of the citizens and NGOs and governments are coming into it, and then perhaps we can have a hope for a better future.
Thank you. And I want us to talk about some of the Iran things as well. So we saw a reduction in air pollution, but that was not permanent. So as soon as the government started, they started opening up businesses and cities, we saw a rise in traffic. They even lifted restrictions on cars movements and vehicle movements in cities. So the type of restrictions we had for air pollution, because using public transport was risky for the public. So we immediately saw a bounce back. The same thing that, as Hamid mentioned, that when the economies are poor, governments might loosen their environmental restrictions because they want their economy to be able to survive. They want to provide jobs and they want to produce. So the bounce back can be very quick, and the long-term impacts can be significant. Plus, we saw things like, as you mentioned, 20% increase in water use in Tehran, for example, urban water use, 10% overall in the country. And today we're worried about what might happen in summer. We saw that environmental rangers were not in place for protection because they were not going out, so there were abuses of the system. So Hamid, are you worried about the future?
To some extent, the problem that we are facing is part of our nature, perhaps. We tend to forget, and perhaps if we cannot forget, we cannot progress. And forgetting things helps, or sadly, lead us to repeating some mistake again and again and expect a different outcome. But the difference here is we are in the third decade of 21st century. We could document everything. We have vivid memories of today. So in 10 years from now, it's not like 100 years ago. In 10 years from now, every voice, every video, every pain and suffer is tangible for next generation. And they could learn from this and say, look, we have to find a balance. It's not easy, but it's possible. You have to find a balance between nature and environment in order to have a long-term successful relationship between these coexistence.
I hope that would be the case, and we remember these days and how vulnerable we were, but at the same time we also have to see what was happening on the ground. That the people who didn't have shelter or access to clean water couldn't wash their hands or stay at home. Some of the solutions that we proposed were only applicable in societies where people had access to basic service, and some of the things that we are thinking are just given when we live in other places. Thank you both for this interesting and philosophical discussion. and let's hope that the environment becomes better and better, and it would be in a better situation in the years to come, and we get over this crisis as soon as possible. Thank you.